Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteus and you're watching The World Report. Let's take a look at the headlines this hour. An arrest warrant has been issued for impeached South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol. The court warrant comes after Yoon's short-lived decision to impose martial law. Dozens of people have died in Gaza after strikes on the region and deadly cold conditions. Meanwhile, Israel's army has reportedly intercepted a missile coming from Yemen. American officials have accused Chinese state-sponsored hackers of breaking into systems at the Treasury Department. Labelled as a major incident, employee e-workstations and unclassified documents were allegedly accessed. Joe Biden has announced a multi-billion-dollar aid package for Ukraine. The announcement comes as hundreds of prisoners of war are swapped between Russia and Ukraine. A South Korean court has approved an arrest warrant for suspended President Yoon Suk Yeol, who was impeached after declaring martial law on December the 3rd. Yoon's move aimed at quelling growing political unrest was met with immediate backlash, leading to a dramatic intervention by lawmakers. Just 6 hours later, MPs stormed Parliament, forcing the revocation of the martial law order. The arrest and search warrants were issued by the court in Seoul this morning. Although it remains uncertain whether police will be able to execute them, Yoon has so far refused to cooperate with the investigation into his martial law order, failing to report for questioning over allegations of abuse of authority and orchestrating a rebellion. Additionally, this presidential security service has blocked court-ordered searches of his office and residence. With us for some updates is our reporter Aditya Waharan. Aditya, what are the updates on this?
The court for the investigation court for office for high-ranking officials has approved an arrest warrant for South Korean president on the request of the investigators because he has imposed the martial law in South Korea, which wasn't, in the spirit of the democracy. This has led to widespread protests in South Korea, and this impeachment of the South Korean president is unprecedented because it will further accentuate the political turmoil in South Korea. As we know, already South Korea is embroiled in a conflict with North Korea, with America also involved. So it will be a very complex situation as far as the political situation of South Korea is concerned. It needs to be monitored very carefully as to how this investigation is forwarded in the times to come. Once he is arrested, he'll be taken to the South Korea detention center. So this is all what we know so far. It needs to be known that the political situation in South Korea is serious. Yes, Tom, back to you in the studios.
Thank you very much, Aditya, for that. We are joined live by Pathik Payne, international affairs expert, and Ambassador Sukrish Gul, former diplomat. Can I ask, I'm going to come to you, Pathik, first. South Korea, it's had 3 leaders in the space of 2 weeks, one of them being arrested. Does this show any signs of stabilizing anytime soon?
Good evening. Yes, it is true. And I think that this is the reality of many of those countries which have been famed as democratic, pinnacle of democracy by the West. So I'm not surprised by what's happening in South Korea, even though probably this is one of the first presidents who might get impeached. We must remember this country has been under military rule for more than 40 years. So there are these tendencies to impose martial law now and then, even though it has not been done to that extent in the last, say, 1 or 2 decades. But overall, if you see, it is coming at a very critical juncture in the overall Korean peninsular, geopolitics. If you look at the manner in which North Korea's proximity towards Russia is increasing, and I think in certain way, North Korea is going all out in terms of its the statements that they're giving against South Korea and United States and other allies. So overall, if you look at what is happening in South Korea, it's pretty similar to the kind of democratic instability which we have seen in many of the countries of Western Europe as well. I mean, there have been innumerable change of prime ministers in United Kingdom till the last election. In case of United States also, there were a lot of challenges as to what would be the outcome of this presidential election. If something had been a little more closer in margin, you never know what could have come up in terms of turmoil over there. So I think democracy itself is going through a very critical phase. And even though a lot is said about India, I think India, in spite of all the challenges, remain a far more vibrant democracy than probably many of the Western European countries or the so-called first world countries, in which perhaps even South Korea is also considered. But overall, if you look at from the geopolitical point of view, the kind of security challenges that is coming up in the entire region over there, I think it has come at a juncture which is probably, it's not going to all go well for South Korea. The better stability comes, the better it is for them.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to bring in Ambassador Suresh Ghul for this next question. That is, how likely is it that Yoon is arrested for this?
Very difficult to say, even though the process is such that eventually Yoon will either have to leave the country, or because once he's not the president, he's going to be arrested. He will lose all the privileges, all the security and everything. Therefore, the options for him are very limited. Eventually, I think unless he leaves the country, he is going to be arrested. That is number one. But if I could add a bit more really, and if you permit me to say that, South Korea has shown amazing economic resilience despite unstable and uncertain political conditions. It is not the first time that a president has gone very quickly after ascendancy. In fact, if I go through the data for the last several presidencies, it has been more or less like a roller coaster ride or a conveyor belt kind of a thing. They come and they go very soon. If not 6 weeks, maybe a few months, or maybe just 1 or 2 years. They go after that. That is number one. But number two, the point is, this is the first time that a president has taken the decision to invoke martial law in the country, anywhere in the world, in fact, I would say. Mm-hmm. And does it open up the country for another such move? Lastly, does it give an opportunity for other countries to play a role, a political role in South Korea? Because North Korea is considered as a strategic risk by the USA. What kind of a role will South Korea open itself for the USA to play? That's what I would like to say.
Thank you very much. That's all we have time for with that discussion. We will now move on to more stories. Israeli airstrikes have killed 27 Palestinians and wounded 179 in the latest 24-hour period. According to Gaza's health ministry, among the victims is a 1-month-old Ali al-Batran, who died from hypothermia at Al-Qasr Martyrs Hospital, just 1 day after his twin brother died from the same cause. Meanwhile, Dr. Safia, the director of Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza, has been arrested by Israeli forces after they stormed the hospital and set it on fire. The Israeli military also reported intercepting a missile fired from Yemen before it entered Israeli territory. The UN has condemned Israeli operations targeting hospitals, including Kamal Adwan Hospital, which is now non-operational. Aditya, our reporter, is with us. Can you give me some updates on the situation in Gaza, please?
The casualties are since the Israeli Defense Forces have hit this Kamal Adwan Hospital, which they believe that Hamas the Hamas has been operating covertly from this hospital, and they've been repeatedly hitting this hospital to dismantle the Hamas infrastructure that is there in this hospital. So far, number of casualties are expected to go up because So far, I mean, the count has not been the casualties are being reported. So the number is expected to go up, and the number of the injured people will also go up. And as you rightly pointed out, that the director Abu Safia has been summoned by the IDF. Because Israeli Defense Forces believe that he is the head. He is related to the Hamas, and he has been orchestrating attacks on the IDF. So this needs to be monitored very carefully, because the situation in the Middle East is very, very tense at the moment. After the ouster of Bashar al-Assad from Syria, there have been the political situation in the entire region is going out of control. The third of the front is that from the Houthis from the Yemen also are repeatedly striking Israel. So the situation is very tense and needs to be monitored very quickly. Yes, Tom, back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Aditya, for that. Joining us today is Cope, a Middle East expert, Professor Ephraim Imbar, President of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. I want to come to you first, Jordan Cope. What is being done to stop Israel from blocking humanitarian aid to Gaza, and is it working? These are from reports from the Middle East that Israel is doing this.
If we're going to talk about Israel's participation in humanitarian aid, it should be noted that under international law, Israel does not have to provide international aid or distribute it if it has reasonable suspicion to believe that that aid is going to be siphoned by the combatants and the militants that are fighting it. Israel has outperformed its obligations under international law. It's allowed over 1 million tons of aid into the Gaza Strip. And even after President Biden of the United States threatened to review the United States weapon shipments to Israel under consideration that it might not be following international law, it ultimately decided not to withhold those arms shipments. And so it should be noted regarding the reporting concerning the Kamal Adwan Hospital, the former director Ahmed Khalat was a lieutenant commander in Hamas since 2010. So Israel is doing all that it can to allow the aid into the Gaza Strip. Oftentimes the UN has interfered or has simply been unprepared to deliver the aid provisions that Israel has allowed into the Gaza Strip. Not to mention that aid trucks that have entered the Gaza Strip have at times been attacked by armed factions, especially by Hamas. And of the aid that went to the south previously during the war, I recall approximately 60 to 80% of that aid was believed to have been hijacked and siphoned by Hamas. So Israel is outperforming its obligations under international law, allowing aid in. And we're talking about temperatures in Gaza as if they must be so horrendous right now at this time of the year. I actually looked online to discover that the lowest temperature in Gaza for the last week was approximately 8 degrees Celsius. So it's very unfortunate that people are blowing this conflict out of proportion. It should be noted that this isn't an escalation. The escalation happened on October 7th, 2023, when Hamas unilaterally invaded Israel, killed 1,200 innocent people, raping many of them, burning people alive, including babies, and even decapitating some Israelis. If we're going to talk about humanitarian issues in Gaza, we must not forget the 101 hostages that remain under its captivity.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about the state of the health system in Gaza right now. Obviously, there are these reports of children dying from hypothermia and obviously constant Israeli shelling. Professor Ephraim Imbar, I wanted to ask you about what the current state of the Gazan health system is like.
I do not envy anyone in Gaza. They started the war, and they cannot expect the wars will be the last. The essence of war is doing damage, exacting pain from the attackers. It was mentioned, they started the war. And in a war, there is also collateral damage. And of course, the Gazans that were never living very well because of the Hamas rule in that region, are suffering. And it is the moral responsibility of Hamas that started the war, that caused this terrible suffering to their population. And hopefully they will be able to rise against the rule of this terrorist Islamic radical organization, and they should not complain. They should try to do something about removing this type of government from Gaza. We try to have them actually. The goal of the war is to remove Hamas from ruling Gaza, and they should be thankful to Israeli Defense Forces for trying to do so.
Many people would say that these people that are dying from hypothermia and are dying from the severe rain, the conditions in Gaza that Israel has caused, these people are civilians, these people are not part of Hamas, the terrorist group. What would you say to that?
I think that everybody that is looking at the Gaza situation understands that the Hamas has a population-centering strategy, meaning that they hide among civilians, which is a violation of international law. They try to attack Israeli civilians, and they fully enjoy the suffering of their own civilians because this gives them good PR, as it's being heard from your question.
Thank you very much for joining us both. We will now move on to some more news from across the world. Russia and Ukraine have exchanged hundreds of prisoners in a deal brokered by the UAE. 150 Ukrainian soldiers were swapped for an equal number of Russian troops. US President Biden announced nearly $2.5 billion in military aid to Ukraine. Here is the full report.
Russia and Ukraine have exchanged hundreds of prisoners in a deal brokered by the United Arab Emirates. The Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed the swap of 150 Ukrainian soldiers for an equal number of Russian troops. Ukrainian President Zelensky reported that 189 Ukrainians, including key defenders from Azovstal, Mariupol, Chernobyl, and Snake Island, had returned home. The exchange was deeply emotional, marked with poignant moments as freed Ukrainians reunited with their loved ones in northern Ukraine. This was the 59th prisoner exchange since the full-scale war began and one of the biggest so far.
Ребят, я благодарю вас за службу, за терпение, за мужество, за то, что все перенесли. Мы очень рады, что наше Министерство обороны очень много работало за ваше возвращение. Наш президент очень переживал, и вы уже почти дома.
In addition to the prisoner swap, US President Biden announced nearly $2.5 billion in military aid to Ukraine. The funding includes $1.25 billion from the Presidential Drawdown Authority and $1.22 billion from the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, also revealed $3.4 billion in economic aid to support Ukraine's government and infrastructure amid the ongoing war. Bureau Report, NewsX.
We will now look at some news updates from the Indo-Pacific region. India's space ambitions soared on Monday with the launch of the PSLV C-60 rocket. The mission, called SpadeX, aims to test docking technology in space. The two small satellites will demonstrate rendezvous, docking and undocking. This technology is vital for India's future human spaceflight and moon missions. India is now set to join the ranks of Russia, the US and China with this breakthrough. The country's space program has been growing rapidly, achieving major milestones at a fraction of the cost of global powers. Azerbaijan's prosecutor confirmed that Russia has pledged to identify and punish those responsible for the deadly plane crash on December the 25th. The crash, involving an Azerbaijan Airlines flight, killed 38 people. Authorities have not confirmed if missiles caused the crash, but President Putin apologized to Azerbaijan's President Aliyev. The crash occurred in Russian airspace and Russia's investigative committee promised to take action. President Xi Jinping has announced more plans for a more proactive macroeconomic policies in 2024. Speaking at a top political advisory meeting, Xi acknowledged China's struggles with a property market crisis and weak consumption. Beijing has already implemented several measures, including interest rate cuts and easy home buying restrictions. However, economists warn more fiscal stimulus is needed to boost domestic consumption. China's official growth target of about 5% for 2023 remains at risk, with many economists predicting it will fall short. Severe snowstorms in Japan's northern region have led to dozens of flight cancellations as millions travel home for the new year. Japan Airlines cancelled 42 flights from Hokkaido, affecting 6,000 passengers. NAA also scrapped 14 flights, impacting 800 travellers. Long lines formed at Hokkaido's main airport as passengers sought alternative flights. Both airlines warned of potential delays and further cancellations due to the harsh weather. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has overseen the launch of plans for a new beachside resort. The resort is part of the Wonsan Karma development project in eastern North Korea. Kim called it the first big step in boosting tourism as the country reopens its borders. He expressed satisfaction with the resort's facilities, designed to host key political and cultural events. Kim, accompanied by his daughter, toured the site, which analysts say is a key part of his vision for economic growth through tourism. A Philippine cargo ship sank in the San Bernardino Strait, killing 1 crew member and leaving 2 missing. The vessel, carrying 24 tons of cement, was hit by big waves off Samar Island. 11 crew were rescued overnight and another swam ashore after 25 hours in the water. A search for the missing continues while fishermen recovered 1 body near Biri Island. And that's all we have time for. We will be back soon with more of the latest news from across the world.